Did you know the first African people to arrive in what will become the United States actually landed on these shores more than 100 years before the Pilgrims ever stepped foot on Plymouth Rock? And here's something that might surprise you even more. That first group of Africans arrived earlier than the group we now call the White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the WASPs, who are often thought as the original founders of the United States. The story of foundational black Americans, the people whose ancestors were enslaved within the borders of the United States, are not a sidebar of American history. It is the very ground upon which the story of how America was built. And within that larger story, there are many smaller streams of foundational black Americans, each one a distinct community with its own culture, language, ancestral makeup, phenotype, and its own powerful legacy of survival. When we talk about foundational black Americans, we are talking about a specific group. They are not every black person who lives in the United States today, which is the official definition used by organizations like the National Institutes of Health, includes all black people who are citizens or permanent residents, no matter when their family arrived. That means a recent immigrant from Ethiopia or Jamaica is also called an African American or Black American. But the term Foundational Black American or FBA points to something more specific. It refers to the descendants of nearly 4 million human beings who were enslaved within the border of what we now call the United States. From the colonial era until the end of the Civil War in 1865, these are the people who were forced to build the United States with their hands, their unpaid labor, and their tremendous suffering. And they have a 4 century-year-old history in America. That is unlike any other diaspora story in the world. To understand who these people are, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. The first enslaved Africans in what will become the United States arrived in 1526 with a Spanish expedition to South Carolina. That colony failed, but it planted a seed. The more famous arrival happened in 1619 when a ship carrying 20 and odd Africans came to Jamestown, Virginia. At first, these individuals were treated as indentured servants, meaning they could earn their freedom after a period of labor. But in 1640, that hope began to close. In 1640, a black man named John Punch was sentenced to lifetime servitude after he tried to run away. That was one of the first legal moments that codify what will become chattel slavery, a system where human beings were treated as property and could be bought and sold for generations. And from that moment on, the descendants of the first Africans had no hope of freedom based on time served. Their children, their children's children will be born into slavery. But here's how the story gets rich and complex. Because even within the crushing weight of slavery, diverse and distinct cultures formed. But before I get into that, I have an important announcement. This video only scratches the surface of the story, but in my book, World Encyclopedia of African People, I go much deeper. Not only did I write chapters of each and every FBA community in America, but also on all Afro-derived people around the world. I start with African ethnicities, from the oldest to the youngest lineages, and the many ethnic groups in between, including communities in Africa that emerged during the Middle Ages and the colonial era, as well as the Afro-diaspora around the world, from Arabia to Brazil to Canada. In each chapter, I explore their genetic and ancestral backgrounds, history and migrations, geographic distribution, phenotypic traits, languages and communication, traditional lifestyle and economies, cultural traits and custom, modern identity and diaspora, and much, much more for each and every African ethnic group. It is a truly eye-opening read, packed with knowledge, and one of the best ways to discover your African brethren, a topic that is rarely discussed in popular academia. This book is available on Amazon, and buying it is the best way to support my channel. Check out the link with more details in the description. Thank you very much. Now let's continue with today's topic. Let's start with the mainstream foundational black Americans. These are the descendants of the millions of enslaved people who lived across the American South from Virginia to Texas. After emancipation, their story became the Great Migration, when millions packed up their lives and moved to industrial cities of the North and West, places like Chicago, Detroit, New York, and Los Angeles. That movement shaped much of American culture, especially in music such as blues, jazz, gospel, R&B, rock and roll, soul music, funk music, and most famously, hip hop. They also influenced Northwestern but global politics in a great deal with the Civil Rights Movement, a movement which outlawed racism, in which all non-white people of color who now live in Western countries should be grateful. They also fought for their freedom from bondage. More than 209,000 FBAs fought in the American Civil War, which added a massive momentum to the emancipation movement of slaves throughout the world. They also fought for the freedom of the West during World War II, as more than 1.2 million FBAs served and fought against fascism. Linguistically, they speak a version of American English called African American Vernacular English, in short, AAVE. It is a melodious version of American English spoken by FBAs, which has been a primary driver of Western pop culture, with many words and phrases originating in AAVE eventually entering the mainstream English lexicon. Genetically and phenotypically, the FBAs are a mesticized mixture of dominant Niger-Congo lineages from Nigeria, Cameroon, Congo, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire, which ranges from 73 to 82%, followed by European ancestry from England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, which ranges from 18 to 24%. But there are communities who have even higher European input, ranging from 50 to 45%. These are the Chesapeake FBAs from the Northeast. And the last ancestry to influence the FBA's genetic makeup are the indigenous tribes like the Cherokee and Choctaw, which ranges from 0.8 to 2%. Phenotypically, there are two types, a northeastern one and a southern one. In the deep south, you have the Mississippi. It has a dominant input from Sudanid phenotypes, followed by Congolid phenotypes, with minor Nordic phenotypes from the British Isles. In the northeast along the Chesapeake Bay region, we have the Chesapeake. It is a balanced blend of Niger-Congo Congolid and Sudanid phenotypes, as well as Nordic phenotypes from the British Isles. But today, these phenotypes are mixing and blending into a new and a stable one. Together with the high rate of ongoing mixing with black immigrants from Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America, as well as with other West Eurasians, mestizos, Filipinos, and other immigrant groups, together with FBA's historically low birth rate, in which, in my opinion, FBAs in the future will look more like Brazilian pardos. But there is another stream of FBAs, the Gullah people, also known as the Geechee. They lived on the Sea Islands and coastal low country of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Their story begins with planters who specifically wanted enslaved people from a region of Africa called the Rice Coast, places like Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Angola. These Africans were expert in rice cultivation, and their expertise was brutally exploited. However, they lived on isolated islands cut off from the mainland, and were able to preserve more of their African language, food, and spiritual traditions than almost any other FBA community in America. The Gullah language is a beautiful English-based Creole that still carries the grammar and words from West African languages such as Mande, Vai, and Twi. Genetically and phenotypically, the Gullah are a mesticized, inter-ethnic mix from the Niger-Congo lineage, which made up of Bantu, Mende, Temne, and Bakongo, which ranges from 93 to 97%. They also carry low European ancestry ranging from 3 to 8% from the British Isles, shaping a phenotype I call the Northwestern Africanid. It is a blend of dominant Congolid phenotypes such as Guineo-Cameroonian, Congolicid, and Guineacid, with their Sudanid phenotype mostly being the Senegalese. Another group of FBA are the Louisiana Creole. Their story is completely different because Louisiana was not an English colony. It was ruled first by the French and then by the Spanish. Under those Latin American legal system, a third class of people emerged, who were not just white or black. They were a free person of color, a gens de couleur libre. These were often the children of French or Spanish men and African women, and they could own property and run businesses themselves. Before the Civil War, New Orleans had a thriving community of wealthy, educated, French-speaking free black people. They created a culture that mixed African, French, Spanish, and Native American traditions into something completely new. Creole food, Creole music, and the traditions of Mardi Gras Indians, in which all of these come from this unique history. They were neither fully accepted by a white society nor fully part of the enslaved/freeman black population, as they were their own world, but today are part of the FBA society. Genetically, they are a balanced mixture of Niger-Congo and West Eurasian import, in which 40 to 50% of their ancestry comes from Niger-Congo groups such as the Bambara, Wolof, Mandinka, with minor admixture from Fon, Iwi, and Bakongo. Their West Eurasian import, ranging from 20 to 60%, mostly come from French ethnic groups such as Bretons, Normans, and Assadians, with minor Canarid Berbers and Germans, followed by 1 to 10% indigenous East Eurasian import from tribes like the Gullah, Chitimacha, Homa, and Tinisa Biloxi. Phenotypically, they have a blended phenotype known as Louisianid. It is a balanced blend of Sudanid phenotypes, in which is a balanced blend of Senegalid and Sudanid proper. And on their West Eurasian side, it is random mixtures between Hallstatt Nordid, North Atlantid, Littorid, Gracile Mediterranean, Berberid, and Canarid. Another group of FBAs are the Black Seminoles. When enslaved people escaped from plantations of Georgia and the Carolinas, many of them ran all the way to Florida. At the time, Florida was owned by Spain, and the Spanish were happy to weaken the English colonies by offering freedom to any runaway who converted to Catholicism. These runaways found allies among the Seminole Nation, a Native American tribe that had moved into Florida. Together, they formed a powerful alliance. In 1738, the Spaniards established Fort Mouse, the first legally sanctioned free black town in what would become the United States. The Black Seminoles became famous warriors. They fought against the United States Army in 3 separate Seminole Wars. The American Army never fully defeated them, but eventually, many Black Seminoles were ethnically cleansed to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears alongside their Native American allies. Others escaped across the border into Mexico, where their descendants still live today. However, genetically speaking, they have a high Niger-Congo base, ranging from 75 to 85%, from Niger-Congo ethnicities such as the Mende, Temne, and Bakongo. They also have 15 to 20% East Eurasian import from the Seminoles, who themselves are an amalgamation of Creek, Hittite, and Misakosis tribes, and also have 5% European ancestry from the British Isles. Phenotypically, they have a phenotype known as the Afro-Appalachid. It has a dominant Guineacid base with minor Appalachid Amerindian influences. A similar group to the Black Seminoles are the American maroons. The word maroon comes from a Spanish word meaning fugitive or wild. These were enslaved people who escaped not in the north but into the deepest, most hidden parts of the American landscape. They built secret settlements in the swamps of the Great Dismal Swamp on the border of Virginia and North Carolina, and the Everglades of Florida. They hid in the mountains and the pine barrens. These communities were autonomous, meaning they governed themselves, and some of them lasted for generations. Genetically, they have a high Niger-Congo import ranging from 85 to 90%. They come from a mesticized Niger-Congo ethnicities such as Bakongo, Mende, Wolof, and Mandinka. They also have indigenous East Eurasian ancestries ranging from 5 to 10%, from tribes such as the Seminoles, Nasemond, and Haliwa-Saponi groups. They also carry at least 5% European ancestries from the British Isles. Phenotypically, they have a phenotype called Northern Maroonid. It is a blend of Sudanid phenotypes and Congolid phenotypes, with little European or Native American influences. And then there are the Black Indians, also called the freedmen of the 5 civilized tribes. This is a story that is only now being fully told, when the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole nations were ethnically cleansed from the southeastern United States to what is now Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears. They brought with them their enslaved black people. After the Civil War, the United States government signed new treaties with these tribes that required them to emancipate their slaves and grant those freedmen full citizenship in the tribe. This created a unique legal and cultural status. These black Seminoles, black Cherokees, and black Creeks were both tribal citizens and foundational black Americans. They built their own schools, their own churches, and their own communities within Indian Territory. But over the years, some tribes have tried to strip these freedmen of their citizenship, leading to legal battles that continue to this day. Genetically, they are similar to mainstream FBAs in terms of African ancestry. The only difference is that they have higher East Eurasian indigenous ancestry, which comes from diverse indigenous nations from the 5 civilized tribes, which ranges from 25 to 60% depending on families. Phenotypically, this group has a blended but unstable phenotype of either Afro-Pueblid, Afro-Appalachid, and Afro-Planid. And then there are the foundational Black Canadians. They were the streams of FBAs that flowed northwards across the border into Canada. The Afro-Canadian story begins with the Black Loyalists. When the American Revolution ended, the British promised freedom to any enslaved person who fought on their side. After the British lost, they evacuated thousands of these black soldiers and their families to Nova Scotia and other parts of Canada. These Black Loyalists became the founders of the oldest black communities in Canada, communities like the Black Nova Scotians. Later, Canada became the final stop on the Underground Railroad, the promised land at the end of the long and dangerous journey. For an enslaved FBA in the American South, reaching Canada meant that no slave catcher could follow. The British Crown had abolished slavery, and the Union Jack meant true freedom. This history gave Afro-Canadians a different political orientation than their American cousins. They received freedom from the Crown rather than fighting for it. And to this day, many Black Canadians prefer the term Black Canadian over African Canadian because their identity is tied to the land and to the history of Canada itself, not just to the original continent of their ancestors. Genetically, their African and European ancestry are similar to mainstream FBAs, but they have higher European input due to low black population in Canada. Phenotypically, they are mostly Chesapeakeid, with some Mississippis being common. But the story does not end here. There are even more distinct communities that scholars call triracial isolates. These are groups with a blended ancestry of African, European, and Native American blood who lived in isolated pockets of the country and developed their own unique identities. The Melungeons of East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, and Kentucky are one of the most famous. First documented in the late 1700s, their origins are shrouded in mystery and folklore. They are often lighter skinned with European features, and for generations, they navigated the dangerous color line of the South, creating a fiercely independent mountain culture that claimed its own identity separate from white and black society. And then there are the brass ankles of South Carolina and the red bones of Louisiana and Texas, names that were used as insults by outsiders, but these communities claimed as their own. They lived in the sandhills and the borderlands, extended family networks that intermarried and maintained a mixed heritage identity that did not fit neatly into the simple black and white boxes that American society tried to force them into. So, what does all this mean? It means that the foundational Black Americans are not a single simple group. They are a tapestry. We have the mainstream Black American freedmen, the Gullah, the Louisiana Creole, the Black Seminole, the American Maroon, the West Indian freedmen, and the foundational Black Canadians. All of them share a common root. All of them are the descendants of people who were brought into the New World against their will, who survived the impossible and who built new cultures, new languages, and new nations out of the ashes of slavery. And this matters today because the conversation about race in America often flattens all people into one category. But the difference between a foundational Black American whose ancestors were enslaved in Alabama in 1850 and a recent immigrant from Somalia or Ghana is real. They share the same skin color and they both face racism, but their historical relationship to America is completely different. The immigrant chose to come to America, but the foundational Black American had no choice. Their ancestors built the White House. Their ancestors cleared the forest so that cities could be built, planted the rice, and picked the cotton that made the foundational colony of America economically rich. And they have been fighting for the full promise of American freedom for 400 years. That is a specific story. That is a specific lineage, and that is what it means to be foundational Black American. So guys, there you have it. If you want to learn more about African diaspora around the world, check out my previous videos. And if you want to dig deeper, check out my book, which is available on Amazon. And as always, stay curious, stay smart, and thank you very much for watching.